Welcome back to Jerusalem Minute here on JNS TV. My name is Josh Haston, correspondent for JNS News. I am here in studio. Back in Jerusalem is Alex Trayman, CEO of JNS. Alex, good to have you back on this side of the pond.
It's good to be back. We're definitely in New York, Florida. A lot of warm welcome, people appreciating JNS, what it's doing, wanting to connect to Israel during this time. Really appreciating the work that we do here at JNS. So toured and spoke in many different places, but really no place like home, no place I'd rather be than here in the Jerusalem studio with you right now.
Awesome to have you back, and it certainly has been busy as always. Never a dull moment here in Israel. And just this Friday night at 2:21 a.m., I was sound asleep there in my bed, and all of a sudden, sirens blaring and my phone going crazy, directives from the Home Front Command to seek shelter. As the Houthis, once again, it seems like it's almost every single night, launching a ballistic missile at the state of Israel. The IDF intercepting the missile, in this case, fired by the Houthis in Yemen, this time targeting the Jerusalem area, Judea, Samaria, the Dead Sea area. The first time an air raid siren was sounded in Jerusalem since the Iranian attack on October the 1st. Yeah. So it's like a nightly occurrence.
Also woken Friday night by the sirens. They are intentionally firing them in the middle of the night to disturb all of the sleep. And the IDF and Israel and Home Front Command has widened the circle under which the sirens go off when an incoming missile is coming, because what they have found is that, these are ballistic missiles. They're shot up into the atmosphere. They're coming down as fast as something can travel. I'm not a physicist here, but you don't know exactly where it's going to land. And when they intercept, because the distance is so great, you don't know where shrapnel is going to land after it's intercepted. So there's a very wide area around the intercept that they're putting for the sirens. So when they send just one of these rockets, even if they know that Israel's going to be able to intercept it. And by the way, it's not a guarantee, okay? Intercepting a ballistic missile is somewhat miraculous in its own right, even though we've developed incredible missile defense systems. But they can wake up the entirety of the Israeli populace with just one of these things in the middle of the night and just make every single night hellish.
Yeah, last week one of those missiles got through and landed in a playground, causing significant damage, and it was fortunate, as we said last week, that it was in the middle of the night and there were no children in that playground. At the same time, the IDF, the Israel Air Force, to be precise, conducted strikes against the Houthis there, targeting Sana'a International Airport and the Houthi-controlled capital in Yemen, also various other targets as well. Prime Minister Netanyahu here during Hanukkah saying, "We are determined to cut off this terrorist arm of Iran's axis of evil. We will persist in this until we complete the task." So the Prime Minister saying we're going to keep striking the Houthis if they keep firing on it.
It's really hard to understand what the Houthis' motivation for continuing strikes against Israel is right now. It's clear that they're so far away that they haven't been able to do significant damage. I mean, they have sent over 200 ballistic missiles at Israel since the war started, which is no small amount. But how much damage have they done with 200 missiles? Miraculously, again, it's been very little. Now, they obviously have seen what Israel's done to Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They see what Israel has done to Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. They see how quickly Israel acted in Syria to take out the entirety of the Syrian military with the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Now, Yemen is pretty far away from Israel, okay? This isn't a country that's on its border, okay? It's very far away. There's a large country called Saudi Arabia in between Israel and Yemen. So if the Houthis would stop attacking Israel, Israel would just leave them alone, okay? If they said it's over, I think we would just leave them because they're not an immediate threat along the border, and yet they keep striking. So you have to wonder, who's paying them to do that? They're backed by Iran, we know that, but why are they doing that? And now we're starting to see, again, Israel's taken care of the Gaza front, they've taken care of the Lebanon front, they've taken care of the Syrian front. We know that the Iranian front is coming soon, but it looks like there's a window in there for Israel to show the Houthis that This is not going to be tolerated. And the strikes that Israel has perpetrated inside Yemen, first of all, these are amazing strikes. The idea that Israel is operating and using airstrikes in Yemen, again, this is very far away. They have to fly, some 6 hours there, 6 hours back. They have to refuel there. They have to refuel back unless there's the ability to land in between. And there may be the ability for some of these planes to land. We can't say too much more about it. But this is really the long arm of the Israeli military with precision strikes. They struck the Sana'a airport. By the way, the head of the World Health Organization was about to be boarding a plane at the time when Israel struck there in Yemen. They've taken out numerous ports. I mean, you see the fires burning. These are large-scale fires. So Israel doing immense damage. And we have to see if they can either, create some kind of deterrent force whereby the Houthis say this no longer is worth it, or if Israel's going to keep going and target the senior leadership of the Houthis such that they do what they've done to Hezbollah and take out their ability, their command structure to be able to carry out any attacks in the future.
Some are saying that these attacks by the Israel Air Force on the Houthis are actually trial runs for the eventuality of a necessary strike against Iran should Iran procure nuclear weapons.
Well, you're seeing the best Air Force in the world. I mean, the United States obviously is a much bigger Air Force, but the pilots of the Israeli Air Force are just demonstrating that they are top of class. They are able to carry out these long-range, precision-guided attacks. I mean, since this war started, how many sorties have been run? How many times have these planes been in the air? How many hours have these pilots logged? And, I don't want it to bring any bad omens, but, we haven't even heard about one accident yet from the Air Force, which is incredible. So they've been able to avoid all air defenses, and they've just have carried out and demonstrated ultimate superiority in the region.
At the same time, the United States is involved in strikes against the Houthis. White House advisor saying U.S. airstrikes on Houthis in Yemen will continue as long as needed. At the same time, though, and this is actually looks to me like a sign of weakness, there's a quote here by John Kirby, the White House National Security Communications Advisor. He talked about the U.S. strikes on the Houthis, and also I should mention here the Thermal High Altitude Area Defense System, the THAAD, which is an American missile defense battery used this past Friday night here in Israel. We talked about how it was being implemented here, but he said something that's a little bit troubling here. He said this is about destroying their ability, the Houthis' ability to conduct these kinds of attacks against Israel. But he said it's not about wiping every Houthi fighter off the map. Now, you could be right. Like, it's probably impossible to wipe every single Houthi fighter off the map. But why say something like this? Why show weakness? Why say we're not basically all in on trying to strike the Houthis? I don't like the way this sounds.
Exactly. This is the type of leverage that the United States could be applying. They could say, we are going to wipe every last Houthi leader off the map. Now, even if you don't intend to do it and you're not going to carry that out, if the Houthis feel like this is the end of the line, that's how you create deterrence. When you say this is not about wiping every Houthi leader off the map, what incentive does a Houthi leader have to stop what they're doing? They're not scared in their boots, which is how they're supposed to be. And of course, the United States should be dealing with the Houthis. This is not only an Israeli issue. It's very easy to argue that the war between Israel and Hamas is a war that Israel needs to deal with by itself because Hamas attacked Israel and they're not attacking anybody else. Same thing with Lebanon. This is Israel's backyard, and they're attacking only Israel. But here, the Houthis, they have been interrupting international trade in one of the busiest commercial waterways in the world, which is the Red Sea. They have hijacked ships. They've attacked hundreds of ships. They have directly attacked with missiles against U.S. naval vessels that were placed in the region to ensure passage of commercial vessels. Okay, and U.S. vessels have also, including like the USS John Carney, which should probably win the award for the most action of any U.S. naval vessel in the last year, have intercepted dozens upon dozens of cruise and ballistic missiles fired at Israel and also fired at it. So here you have the Houthis that are really interrupting commercial activity all over the world. And what that does is it raises the prices of all material goods in a time when you're already dealing with mass inflation, because ships, instead of using the Suez Canal, which is a mega shortcut for any goods coming from China into Europe, now all of those ships have to go around the southern tip of Africa. Okay, so the price of all goods is going way up. And also Egypt just took $1.5 billion loan, okay, because they're losing revenue from ships that are not traveling through the Red Sea, because they won't travel there because the insurance companies won't insure the ships to go through there. So this is affecting the entire region. It's affecting the entire world. And the U.S. has been attacked directly itself by the Houthis. So there's really no reason why the United States should not be saying, look, this is a problem and we're going to deal with it directly. Maybe together with Israel, okay, coordinated as an alliance, or maybe say, you know what, Israel? Like, you're dealing with Hamas, you're dealing with Hezbollah, you're dealing with Syria, all these countries right around your backyard. These guys are out, here down at the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. They've also were engaged in this, brutal civil war, a brutal war with Saudi Arabia for many years. This is something that we're going to take. And here, instead of that, you have the United States saying, well, we don't want to cause any trouble, right, in the region. We'll make sure they can't fire the ballistic missiles, but the Biden administration, they took the Houthis off the list of designated terror organizations.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, what do you have to do to get on the designated list of terror organizations that the Houthis haven't done? Like, what more would you need to do to get on that list at this point?
Well, listen, I mean, we have President Trump coming in now in, I think it's 23 days or so. I mean, when he was talking about the situation in Gaza, he said directly to Hamas, they'll be held to pay if you don't return the hostages. I would not be surprised if President Trump issued a similar statement to the Houthis, like, stop firing against Israel, stop attacking our ships, or they'll be all held to pay. I would not be surprised if in just a few days in office.
That's what Kirby should be saying.
He's going to go ahead and say it. Unfortunately, we've been dealing with this now for 4 years, but things are about to change. We talked about how you and I were both woken up on Friday night trying to get some sleep. I know you're jet lagged, but the Houthis wouldn't have it. They woke you up at 2:20 a.m. And then on Shabbat day, I don't know if this happened to you, but this happened to me. Sirens as well, pretty rare over the last several months. Rockets intercepted, fired from northern Gaza by the Hamas terrorist organization, also into Israel, targeting the Jerusalem area. The Israeli Air Force downed these 2 rockets. Again, that hasn't happened in a very long time. They've targeted, throughout the course of the year, they've targeted Jerusalem several times, but they've mainly focused, of course, on the communities in the south and the north. And I don't want to compare the fact that I wasn't able to nap Shabbat afternoon, to the thousands and thousands of rockets and missiles fired on the communities in the north by Hezbollah, the south by Hamas. But that being said, it's pretty rare at this juncture, I would say, that they targeted Jerusalem. But just this morning it was reported that Israel actually found the exact location of where these launchers were fired and took out the launchers which fired these long-range rockets.
It's actually easy to find the location because, the Qassam rockets that they fire from Gaza are rudimentary rockets. They follow a basic trajectory, unlike some of these ballistic and cruise missiles that can even change direction as targets shift, or you can adjust the target while the thing's in the air, which is it's amazing. But the Qassam rockets are not like that. They're basically unsophisticated pipes that have explosive in it, and that's why the Iron Dome is so successful at intercepting the Qassam rockets from Gaza, because the second something's launched, you see the speed, you see the trajectory, you know where it's going to go, and you know exactly where to intercept it. So it's, again, I'm not good at geometry per se, but it's not too much complicated math to know that if this thing's going at this speed and you aren't going to intercept it here, you know exactly the point where this thing was launched from. Now, Hamas still operates in Gaza. I think it's very important to understand that the way Hamas structured this war from the beginning, they know that Israel's military success historically has always been these 6-day wars, right? Israel comes in, they destroy the entirety of some of the Egyptian Air Force, and then everything, you take a few key cities and places, and then you win a war very quickly. Hamas, Hezbollah, they understand Israel's strength as a state military with an air force, and so what they have done is they have set up all of their paramilitary equipment and infrastructure among civilian infrastructure, okay? And what that means is that Israel has had no choice but to go building to building inside the Gaza Strip. There are areas in the Gaza Strip that the IDF has not destroyed yet. And when the IDF does go into some of these areas, what are they finding there? Tunnels, rockets. They're continuing to find it. There are some areas that the IDF has not entered as of yet. Why? Because it is believed, or there's intelligence, that there are hostages in those areas. And so if Israel would do what they need to destroy those areas, they would probably risk killing the hostages that are left alive. So they're not doing that. And so even though Hamas has fired most of their arsenal at Israel already, and Israel has destroyed whatever percentage of the remaining arsenals left, there's still rockets. And that's going to be the case for a long time. There's not any more 50,000 rockets. Maybe there's 1,000 rockets, but 1,000 rockets can still be fired if you have the launchers. Also, there is very likely missile producing capability inside the Gaza Strip. So even if they're out, they can make more. And it doesn't take too many. You see, they fired just 2. All it takes is 2 to keep the war going, and that's what they're doing. So there are battalions in Gaza that have not been destroyed. There are battalions in Gaza that have consolidated and reorganized. There's still rockets. There's still tunnels. There's still hostages. And that's why 14 months on, you still have a war. And the way it works in any of these types of major military operations is you make the most gains in the beginning. And when you think you're 90% of the way done, you might only be 50% of the way done. It really takes a lot of sustained effort. And Hamas wanted this to be a war of attrition, and that's what they're getting.
And here's the perfect example of it. 240 suspected terror operatives detained in northern Gaza, the IDF completing an operation against Hamas at the Kamal Adwan Hospital in the surrounding area there in northern Gaza. Operation launched because the hospital once again became a key stronghold for terrorism and attacks against Israelis. And then there was another one of these, I would call it a blood libel even against Israel. A fire somehow started in the hospital, the IDF denying it had anything to do with it. And of course, if you go on social media, the anti-Israel haters or whatnot, accusing Israel of trying to burn down a hospital. Number one, it's no longer a hospital. It is a Hamas terror center. Number two, Israel says it had nothing to do with whatever fire, which started apparently in some empty building. It had nothing to do with Israel's military operations. But as you said, the war is not over. Another 240 Hamas and other terror organization-related operatives detained over the weekend.
Well, you see here, in 2 of the details here, the strategy of Hamas. First, to organize itself in the civilian infrastructure, including in hospitals. Most every hospital in the Gaza Strip is a base for Hamas. Schools, mosques.
UNRWA centers.
Right. These are the bases of operation, and there's a reason why Hamas picked those centers to be their centers of operation. Remember the Al-Shifa hospital in the Gaza Strip, that there were hostages being held there. And here you have, and then you see obviously social media. This is a big part of the strategy also. Israel operates in a hospital, then social media goes to work. This is the strategy of Hamas. This is how they plan to win the war from the outset. You have 240 people arrested. Doesn't mean that 240 people are terrorists in the hospital, but definitely you have terrorists operating in the hospital. And so why do you detain 240 other people? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one is you want to interrogate everybody that you possibly can because you want information on where there could be hostages. So whoever you can round up, and whoever you can get intelligence from, get intelligence from. And the second thing is, at this point, if you look around the Gaza Strip, what do you see? You see destruction. Things look very bad. It can actually be better conditions to be in an Israeli prison right now than it could be to be living inside Gaza. And if you go to Israeli prison, you become a hero in the Gazan society and Palestinian society. So it's, in a way, it's like a win-win for you to be arrested and to thrown into a Palestinian prison. Your conditions are much better because, quite frankly, a lot of these prisoners get better conditions than maybe they should. And B, they get this tremendous honor of sitting in an Israeli jail until they get released. And you might get some intelligence. So this is why you see the IDF continues to operate. There's a lot of work to be done over there. That's why the prime minister says that while he'd be willing to negotiate for hostages and that there could be a ceasefire in Gaza, that it's not an end to the war. And you've heard the defense minister, Katz, say the IDF is going to be in the Gaza Strip for a long time. And that is the truth of it, that even when the major hostilities are declared over, the IDF is going to continue to operate there because they keep moving into new places that they haven't destroyed yet, and they keep finding rockets, they keep finding tunnels, they keep finding terror operatives in hospitals and mosques and schools and everywhere else.
Yeah, they said over the weekend that the IDF essentially set up an army base, if you will, in the strategic Netzarim corridor. That's number one. You also mentioned the hostage negotiations. Again, 100 Israelis still being held in the dungeons of Hamas. A senior official reported by N12 here over the weekend said that Hamas may agree to a brief deal that would see a limited amount of hostages released as a gesture in preparation for the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump. Again, every single week we have different information or different reports.
Look, the prime minister just this morning, I saw a report this morning that the prime minister's office said that this is not true, that Israel is not going to negotiate for a limited release as a gesture to President Trump. I mean, Israel's not holding hostages, okay? They don't need to give a gesture to President Trump. President Trump is going to use all the leverage that he has, as he's already said. If the hostages are not released by the time I get into office, it'll be all hell to pay. Israel doesn't owe Trump a gesture here. Israel's trying to get its hostages back.
But this to me shows that Hamas is shaking in their boots.
Exactly.
The fact that Trump
know
is coming into
that
power.
that the situation could be a lot worse. Okay, so a couple things. When it comes to hostage negotiations, Israel's leverage, especially backed by President Trump coming into office, is much, much stronger than it has been at any point in the war until now. So there should not be any negotiation for a partial release at this point. Okay, it could be that some kind of release takes place over a period of a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. We could wrap our heads around that. But the idea that 20 hostages will be released now, and then if something happens later, maybe in 30 or 60 days, more hostages will be released. No, that has to be off the table. It has to be a negotiation for the release of all known living hostages plus the bodies of hostages that are known to be dead. Like, it has to be an all or nothing deal. The second thing is that the idea that Israel will release known terrorists that are sitting in Israeli jails back out into Israeli society, that has to be completely off the table. Remember, Yahya Sinwar, the architect of the October 7th massacre and the head of Hamas that Israel assassinated, he was released as part of the Gilad Shalit deal, in which Israel released over 1,000 prisoners from Palestinian jails to get back one living soldier, Gilad Shalit. And the number of people that have been killed by terrorists that were released from Israeli jails does not justify the return of one soldier. Okay, it's blood on their hands again. You do not get rehabilitated as a Palestinian terrorist sitting in Israeli jail. That is a badge of honor, and statistics show that a high percentage of the prisoners that get released back into the society go on to do what they're trained to do, what they've been incited to do while they're in the Israeli jail, and that's kill again. Okay, so that also has to be completely off the table. People are talking about Marwan Barghouti, okay, like a arch terrorist serving consecutive life sentences in Israeli jail, being released, and then perhaps he can be the next leader of the Palestinian Authority after Mahmoud Abbas. Okay, so we've got Yasser Arafat sitting in prison, and we're going to make that same mistake that we made in Oslo again and just put master terrorists back out into society and think that they're going to lead the Palestinians to peace. I mean, what do they say? Fool me once, shame on you. I mean, how many times do we have to get fooled? We're not going down that route again. Okay, so Israel has a lot of leverage here. And so how do you use the leverage, right? So people are asking me, what is President Trump going to do? How do you get the hostages out if you're not going to release terrorists? What are you going to do? So here's one thing that could happen. Okay, I haven't talked to President Trump about this. I haven't spoken to any of his policy advisors about this. But how could this work? President Trump could come into office and say, the previous administration, they were pretty high on moving humanitarian aid into Gaza, right? They wanted a lot of trucks. Bring trucks. So you know what? I'm willing to double the number of trucks that come into Gaza. You thought Biden wanted to give you humanitarian aid? I'll give you twice as much humanitarian aid as the Biden administration gave. But only if the hostages come out. If the hostages come out.
I thought you were going to say the opposite. I thought you were going to say, 0 trucks, give us the hostages now, or you get nothing. We'll turn off the electricity, we'll turn off the water, we'll stop with the aid.
So that's the other side of the sentence. It's, okay, you want to release the hostages today? I'll do much more than Biden ever did. But the hostages don't come out. You're not going to see a truck of humanitarian aid come in. That's exactly right. And that's the way I think that if you understand Trump and the way he uses leverage, there has to be a carrot and there has to be a stick. And I think it's very easy to use carrots and sticks here. And of course, what's really important with humanitarian aid is that it has to be checked. I was speaking to an Israeli soldier last night who spent months in Gaza, and only in the last couple of weeks did he come out of Gaza. And he told me this. He said, humanitarian aid trucks that come from Jordan are not inspected by Israel. That the Biden administration has demanded that trucks that originate in Jordan with humanitarian aid, that Israel is not allowed to inspect it, and Israel has been going along with that.
So there could be weapons.
So you have
what could be, who knows?
Why would anybody demand that humanitarian aid trucks not be inspected by Israel? Okay? The only people that would want to demand that humanitarian aid trucks will not be inspected by Israel are people that want to smuggle things that are not supposed to go through humanitarian aid trucks.
And why do we
agree
to this, though? Why would we agree to that? And I understand the power of the Biden administration and the United States in general.
This is the reason, because the Gazans and the international agencies have been using the humanitarian aid as the trigger behind the genocide charges, behind the war crime arrest warrants put out against Netanyahu, against former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. That's the trigger that the United States say, if you don't facilitate increasing amounts of humanitarian aid, we're going to allow for anti-Israel Security Council resolutions to be passed at the United Nations. So Israel is, for some reason, and I don't understand it, but they have agreed to allow this humanitarian aid to come in uninspected. That's also something that's going to change, I think, in a few weeks. But I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful that Hamas will release these living hostages before January 20th. And if not by January 20th, soon after. We've got to get these hostages out already.
Way too long.
And then we have to finish off Hamas once and for all, right? There can't be the end of the war just because the hostages came back. You cannot allow Hamas to reform itself.
By the way, I just want to mention this before we turn to Iran here. You said the word society several times, releasing these terrorists back into society. Who is the society? Well, a new poll here. This is actually a poll out of Ramallah. This is not an Israeli poll. It's a poll out of the Palestinian Authority, an organization, saying that close to 2/3 of Arabs in Gaza and Judea and Samaria prefer Hamas to be part of or even to lead a future governing body in Gaza after the war is over. So just, we talk about civilians and there's so many civilians or whatnot. These people want Hamas, at least 2/3, want Hamas to be part of any form or any future governing coalition, just to show you the headspace of where these people are.
I want to talk about this for a second. So first of all, when I said society, about releasing terrorists back into society, I wasn't even talking about into Gaza, okay? That might even be palatable. The last time Israel did the prisoner release, when we got back 105 of the hostages, we released prisoners at a clip of 3-to-1 for every hostage. They were released back into where they came from in Israel, okay? They were released back into Judea and Samaria. They were released back into Jerusalem. They were literally released back into society where they could kill Jews, right?
And how many did we have to go and kill afterwards? Because they went day one back to terrorism.
So, I could wrap my head around some kind of a symbolic release of prisoners, maybe on a 1-to-1 clip, if they're exiled. Like if they go to Qatar, if they go to Turkey, if they go someplace else. But to put them back in their homes in Jerusalem, you had one woman, she stabbed her neighbor, okay? And that's why, or she threatened to stab her neighbor, and that's why she was put into jail. And now she's back home living next door to the same neighbor that she tried to stab, okay? That cannot happen. But when you talk about Hamas being part of the governance of Gaza, I took a look at this poll, and I think it's worse than it's even being reported here, that the 2/3 of Arabs in Judea and Samaria want Hamas to be the government, okay, in Judea and Samaria, okay? So it means that the Palestinians that are living amongst Israelis in Judea and Samaria, they would vote today for Hamas. You see,
80% said that they supported the October 7th massacre.
correct,
In Judea
okay?
and Samaria.
And,
Yeah.
and why didn't they commit the October 7th massacre themselves? Because the IDF was not in Gaza, and that allowed Hamas to build up all this terror infrastructure there. The IDF moves in and out of Judea and Samaria, and every time a terror cell, gets a little bit larger and there's intelligence, Israel comes in and they mow the grass, they pull the weeds, right? That's why they haven't succeeded to do that kind of attack on the scale that Hamas did on October 7th. But, people are talking about the Palestinian Authority taking control of the Gaza Strip after the war is over. The Palestinian Authority, led by Fatah and Mahmoud Abbas, is the flip side of the same coin as Hamas.
Terrorists in suits.
It's heads and it's tails, okay? The Palestinian Authority to this day is funding the murder of Israelis, okay? Terrorists that are sitting in Israeli jails, the ones that they're talking about being released in some kind of a hostage negotiation, they are getting paid a salary by the Palestinian Authority to sit in the jail. And the length of the term determines how much money they're paid by the Palestinian Authority. Now, if somebody tries to commit an act of terror and they're killed by the IDF in the act of trying to commit first-degree murder, the Palestinian Authority is paying the family of the dead terrorist a stipend. They're doing that today, okay? They are inciting to violence, and they are financially incentivizing terror even now. And they are talking about a unity government with Hamas. They're saying, okay, we'll join together forces with you. If they're willing to join forces with Hamas, that means they are the flip side of the same coin. They are not an alternative to Hamas. They may be attacking each other because that's what a lot of these rival factions do. Just look at what's going on in Syria, how many rival factions they are, but it's terrorists fighting terrorists. And so the Palestinian Authority cannot be part of the solution of governance in Gaza. And quite frankly, we have to take a look at whether the Palestinian Authority has a role to play in the governance of Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. This is very, very important, and I think this is what is going to be one of the major policy questions regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the next Trump administration. Is the Palestinian Authority some kind of agent of stability, or are they just another terror organization? And how else should the Palestinians be governed if not by the Palestinian Authority?
Yeah, I think the PA's record speaks for itself, including the pay-to-slay program and how they've been handling things for the last 35-plus years. Essentially inciting to terrorism. Just look at the educational system, look at the schools. You can figure out who exactly the PA is. Let's move on to Iran, if we can. Two different reports here. Number one, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, an opposition group, reported on accelerated work by the Iranians to develop nuclear detonators. So that's one story. That's one thing happening. At the same time, the Iranian foreign minister telling reporters in Beijing that 2025 will be an important year regarding Iran's nuclear issue. Again, they are preparing a strategy now that there's a new reality coming into play on January the 20th. Trump administration in his first term levying sanctions on Iran, stopping the funding of, essentially those pallets of cash, which were being sent. I believe that started under the Obama administration. So they know that things are going to be much tougher for them in terms of operating their terrorist strongholds. Israel obviously taking it to Hezbollah and to Hamas and now to the Houthis. But Iran directly now preparing for this new reality where it will not be just freedom to do what they want and exporting their number one item there, which is terrorism. They have to reevaluate with this new reality.
Well, the last time Israel struck Iran, they hit this secret nuclear facility, which we discussed, called the Parchin facility. That's not a facility where they enrich uranium. That is a facility where they are working on this explosive nuclear detonator, and specifically having a detonator that could fit on one of these ballistic missiles that Iran has been firing. So this is one of the biggest pieces of the danger. It's not only having the nuclear weapon, it's being able to detonate it and to deliver it. And we know that Iran is working on this. And for so many years, People were saying, and the Iranians were saying, well, this is a peaceful nuclear program. This is a nuclear energy program. Now, obviously, Iran didn't need an energy program that was nuclear because they sit on some of the world's largest reserves of natural gas and they have oil. So why do they need other sources of energy if you have high concentrations of fossil fuel energy? So they're saying it's just for peaceful purposes. Well, you don't need to have a detonator and ballistic missiles if you're running a peaceful program. So that was a lie that the Iranians were peddling for years, and the West, including the United States and the Western Europeans, all bought into it, and they allowed this to get to this point. And so what's going to happen now? I mean, Israel obviously understands that if they file down this ring of fire that the Iranians invested billions of dollars into, billions and billions and probably hundreds of billions of dollars into, and now all the tentacles of the terror octopus, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, Syria, have all been filed down. What does Iran have left? They're in great risk, and you see what's going on in Iran right now. You have rolling power outages. The Iranian currency is at all-time low.
Lack of gas.
People are talking about revolution happening in Iran and the end of this regime.
That's why Netanyahu keeps addressing time and time again the Iranian people directly. He's done it several times.
Correct, now. And it's hopefully prophetic, the types of messages that he's doing, but it's certainly an amazing embarrassment to the regime itself and an encouragement to the Iranian people to take their country back from these mullahs. I mean, remember, Iran used to be a proud country that has a very deep culture, very intelligent people, and they want their passport to be worth something. And people used to value seeing the Iranian passport. Today, people look at the Iranian passport and they think terrorist, and Iranians don't want that anymore. They want to be considered a normal, rich nation, not just rich economically, but culturally, with something to add. And so what that means is if this regime of mullahs inside Iran, the Islamic Republic, if they feel like they're a caged tiger and this is the end of game, and right now they're on the cusp of being able to develop a nuclear weapon, it means that Iran has never been more dangerous than this moment.
Absolutely.
And you have to worry. You have to worry about it a lot. I think there's been some kind of advantage. This is very interesting. People said, the Biden administration could have supported Israel to a much stronger degree and given Israel the green light instead of constantly putting up red lights to fight against Hamas. These red lights have had an unintended benefit, which is making the war go slower. And there's been all kind of benefits of that too. It's forced the IDF to be super efficient and effective. I don't want to talk too much about that, but slowing the war down to the point where we've taken out Hamas, Hezbollah. Now we're dealing with the Houthis. Syria's fallen, and we're getting to the point where the war is naturally progressing to this final theater, which is Iran. And it's happening at exactly the moment when President Trump is coming into office. If the Biden administration would have said to Israel in the very beginning of this war, you have 120 days, total green light, finish off Hamas, do everything you need to get your hostages back, take out Sinwar, destroy the rockets, destroy the tunnels. But you know what? 120 days, 180 days even, and this thing's over and we get back to life. You'd still be sitting with a Biden administration for an extended period, and the war would never have progressed to Iran. And now you're getting to the point where this president, Biden, is in his last month in office, complete lame duck. Okay, so Israel has as much freedom of operation as it's ever had right now to do whatever it wants, and maybe it will operate now. Or if Israel's already talking with the incoming Trump administration, and I'm certain that they are, perhaps they are putting together the plans either to allow Israel to take out the nuclear facilities themselves, target senior officials in the Iranian government, or with the help of the United States doing it together. Maybe even the United States is saying, you know what, we're just going to help you finish this once and for all. We're going to do this, and then we're going to pave a real era of peace in the Middle East. So, we said, how many times do we say it on the show? Changing the Middle East is a two-step process, easy to define, difficult to implement. The first is destroying the terrorists. The second is normalizing with the moderates. We're on the brink of taking out Iran the entire ring of fire that has been penalizing this Middle East for decades. And what's on the flip side of that? Normalization with Saudi Arabia, which is exactly what Iran and Hamas were trying to prevent when they attacked on October 7th to begin with. And so much credit to Prime Minister Netanyahu for putting us in this position. And I interviewed the Prime Minister on the eve of the last election. And I asked him, I said, what do you want to accomplish in another term in office that you weren't able to accomplish in the previous terms? He said two things. Number one is make certain once and for all that Iran never crosses the nuclear threshold so that they'll not be an existential threat to Israel. And two, expand the circle of peace and normalize relations with Arab countries, first and foremost Saudi Arabia. And I don't think that he knew exactly how that was going to happen when he said that. But right now you're seeing that we're right on the cusp of it. And the one that can really help make that happen for Israel, even if just through backing and support, is incoming President Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how things have changed since, when we even started this podcast. I don't know, maybe it's been a year or whatnot, where Israel was then and where we are now with the new Middle East shaping. We are nearly out of time, but we have to mention here on the local scene, unfortunately, a 28-year-old terrorist from Tulkarm in Samaria shouting Allahu Akbar, stabbing and murdering an 83-year-old Israeli woman. This is a woman living in a nursing home in the town of Herzliya.
Yeah.
And apparently this guy was, known by the security forces. I read today, I can't confirm that perhaps he was providing Israel with information at some point and then decided to turn on Israel. Attacking an 83-year-old woman here.
This is
just
what
the other day. Just terrible to see.
This is what Palestinian terrorists call warfare. Yeah. Stabbing an 83-year-old woman in a nursing home to death.
Unbelievable. Just a horrible event there. But even with the changing Middle East, we still have these issues on almost a nearly daily basis, whether it's rocket attacks, firebomb attacks, and in this case, a murderous terror attack. May God avenge her blood. We're, again, nearly out of time. I would just want to finish up here. The Prime Minister of the State of Israel and his health. Prime Minister Netanyahu will have his prostate, I don't know if it happened yet, he will have his prostate removed here on Sunday, his office said in a statement. Last Wednesday, he underwent an examination. Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. Doctors discovered an infection in his urinary tract resulting from a benign enlargement of the prostate. So they discovered this, and the Prime Minister today having an operation. So I don't remember who the acting prime minister is now, but, I think the number one issue here with this story is, the health of our prime minister. He works 20-hour days, doesn't sleep. I don't know how he was able to take care of himself. His body probably works harder or as hard as any other world leader. You could make an argument for it.
And how much pressure he's under.
Oh, right? For sure.
How much
war
pressure.
On 7 fronts. At the same time.
First is the war on 7 fronts. Second, he's been testifying in his trial multiple days a week. Now they're threatening to investigate his wife, Sarah, right, as well as part of an extension of these trials, because they're seeing, by the way, that the trials are not going well. The judges are telling the prosecution that they have no case for bribery over and over and over again. Right now, I just saw a headline in the Times of Israel from the other day that they've asked the defense to speed up their presentation and that they're being too oriented in all of the details. Now, I'm sure that the prosecution wasn't too oriented in all the details when they named over 200 witnesses in the trial, which, if you want to convict somebody of corruption, how many witnesses do you need? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't need 200
over the course of 4 or 5 years.
Right.
Like that.
So now that the prime minister's saying, well, we'll just do the same thing you did, and we'll just unravel this whole thing detail by detail by detail. And so the court is now saying, well, hurry up. But part of the reason why they're saying hurry up is because there's no case. But you have a prime minister who's fighting a war and at the same time is being forced to testify in a 5-year-old kangaroo court trial. Okay, and now they're threatening to open up an investigation on his wife. The attorney general is nonstop working to try to crash his government.
So it's no surprise he's an inflamed prostate, you're saying, at the end of the day.
Look, but he has to deal with that too. And I mean, just the amount of things that he can deal with. And it was only just over a year ago he had a pacemaker installed. We know that it was 2 episodes of fainting, including on Yom Kippur, I guess a year and a half ago, and had to have a pacemaker put in. So, I mean, this guy deals with so much pressure. I don't think anybody can handle as much pressure as the prime minister deals with. So we certainly wish him a speedy recovery. I think it's a good opportunity to be very thankful and appreciative of the war leadership. I mean, nobody 2 months into this war thought that Israel would be in the position that it is now, and it's really shaping up very clearly to everybody that this is turning into a massive Israeli victory. I mean, even if the war ended today, you would acknowledge it as a massive Israeli victory. But we're only entering the fourth quarter of this war. Iran is still on the table. President Trump's coming into office. So hopefully this is just a minor blip for Netanyahu and his health, and he's going to be back to. I'm sure that he's not taking any days off, by the way. Okay, I'm certain that.
I'm sure he's working.
The
from
second
the
he comes back too. He's already working from the hospital, and he probably deserves a day off more than anybody else. But this is a prime minister that doesn't take days off. I mean, he says, in a wartime, there's no such thing as Shabbat. Okay, this guy works 20 hours a day, between 15 and 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's unbelievable. So hopefully a speedy return to health.
Speedy return to him. And, by the way, to everyone out there who is celebrating the holiday of Hanukkah we didn't mention before, happy Hanukkah. Hope you're having a meaningful and joyous festival of light. And this is actually the last show for 2024 on the Gregorian calendar. The Jewish New Year was several months ago, but it is the last show of 2024. So make sure you tune in 2025. A lot more to come.
And just one word about Hanukkah. Like, when we light these candles, this is spiritual light. Okay, we've been talking about a war, and war is deadly. It's dirty. It's physical. But the essence of the Jewish people is not just to be a physically strong nation, which obviously we have to be. It's about being a spiritually strong nation, and it's taking out evil. What it does in the world is it allows a vacuum that can be filled by goodness and spirituality, and that's what these Hanukkah lights represent. And when we light the Hanukkah candles, we start with one, and every night we increase the light. And God willing, just the light of the Jewish people will increase. And as evil is removed from the face of the earth, as we're seeing in this war, it'll be more and more opportunity for just the spreading of spiritual light. And that is what makes the state of Israel a light unto the nations.
Amen to that. Special shout out to Zach Sickerman, our producer, Yuri Svirtsky, Avia Asner, Johnny Wallman, who's manning the booth today for the first time by himself. Ryan Lifshitz is off for Hanukkah. He deserves it. He deserved the vacation. So shout out to all of our wonderful staff here. Make sure you log on to jnis.org for all the latest and breaking news from Israel, the Jewish world, the Middle East. Also JNS TV for all the amazing content, which you're not getting anywhere else. So thanks so much. Happy Hanukkah, and to those who celebrate, Happy New Year 2025. Let's hope for good things in the upcoming year. Josh Haston here in Jerusalem, along with CEO of JNS News, Alex Trayman. Have a great week, everybody.